Usually when we talk about a map, there's this fundamental expectation of objective reality.
Right, like a shared physical space.
Exactly. Think about physical geography. You look at a map of a city, and the roads are just where they are. The buildings are where they are.
Yeah, the cartographer just points and says, here it is. This is the layout.
Right. And it doesn't matter if you're looking at the map or if your neighbor's looking at it. The city remains the city. It's static.
And that shared reality is, well, it's deeply comforting, really.
It is.
Human beings rely on that collective understanding to navigate the physical world together. I mean, it's how we form communities and agree on basic facts.
But then you step into the world of our digital feeds, and suddenly that foundational map is just completely fractured.
Yeah, shattered, really.
We're all staring at our screens, operating under this assumption that we're walking around the exact same digital city square.
Yeah.
But we aren't.
Not at all.
The roads are literally shifting in real time based on where your eyes dart. The buildings are rearranging themselves based on, what makes your heart rate spike.
Which is wild. You're looking at a landscape that is invisible, entirely manipulated, and completely unique to every single user.
Which is the absolute definition of a personalized, algorithmically generated reality.
Right. It's a map that doesn't exist to help you find your destination.
It's a map that constantly redraws itself specifically to keep you from ever leaving it.
Exactly. It wants you lost in the neighborhood.
And that profound disorientation brings us to our mission for today. So welcome to the deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you sitting at the table with us today.
It's a big one today.
It really is. Today we are setting out to explore the invisible code that dictates our digital lives, our politics, and even our own self-image.
We have a massive stack of sources to get through.
And I mean a beautifully diverse stack. We are pulling from these dense academic dissertations that analyze generational psychology.
We've got some hard-hitting investigative journalism from the markup in there, too.
Yes, and leaked internal documents from Meta. And we're sitting those right alongside Meta's official public defenses, to be fair.
Plus some medical analyses focusing on the actual neurophysiology of the brain.
So it is an incredibly comprehensive set of data.
It really is. And the through line connecting all of these distinct fields is this central mystery, right?
Right.
To truly understand the modern human mind, we first have to reverse engineer the machinery that is constantly competing for its attention.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our journey today is going to move pretty systematically.
Right, step by step.
First, we're going to unpack exactly how social media algorithms create these intense, impenetrable political echo chambers.
Then we'll look at how the platforms attempt to govern those spaces.
Often failing spectacularly, I might add. Then we pivot. We're going to look at how this exact same underlying technology shifts its focus from society as a whole down to the individual.
Right, driving this rising epidemic known as Snapchat dysmorphia among teenagers.
And finally, we will look at the architecture of a way out, how we might ethically redesign these spaces to protect our mental well-being.
So we're really tracing the algorithm's impact from the macro level of societal polarization all the way down to the micro level of individual self-perception.
Exactly. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I want to make a special note for our English language learners who are tuning in with us.
Oh, yeah, this is important.
This topic is full of highly specific, culturally relevant terminology. We are going to be using vocabulary that is essential for navigating the modern internet.
Words that you really need to know if you're going to talk about tech today.
So pay close attention to the context. And at the end of our journey today, we are going to dedicate a segment to breaking down the nuance of those specific English terms.
Because it's not just about the literal definitions, right? It's about how they function in our culture.
Exactly. Mastering the vocabulary of this space is essentially mastering the mechanics of how the digital world operates. All right, let's start with the foundational premise. The literature repeatedly uses this term, the attention economy.
Yes, you see that everywhere.
But to really grasp how this economy works, the sources point to a core concept, which is persuasive technology. Can you break down the mechanics of that for us?
Sure. So persuasive technology is a term that essentially describes digital environments that are explicitly designed with the underlying motive of modifying user behavior.
Okay, modifying behavior. How so?
Well, it leverages our psychological vulnerabilities and emotional responses. It's trained to influence what you do, what you buy, and crucially, how long you stay engaged.
So these are not just neutral tools.
No, not at all. Like a hammer is a neutral tool, right? It just sits in a toolbox until you decide you want to build something.
Right, the hammer doesn't care if you use it.
Exactly. But a persuasive technology is a hammer that, well, it sends you a push notification suggesting you really need to build a birdhouse right now.
And then it probably rewards you with a burst of digital confetti when you finally pick it up.
Exactly. It's active persuasion. So the platforms are actively persuading us to adopt behaviors that benefit their business model.
And the data on when this architectural shift really took hold is staggering. The research points to a very specific timeline regarding political polarization in the United States.
Right. The 2014 survey.
Yeah, this survey found that Republicans and Democrats have become more politically divided, more deeply hostile toward one another than at any other point in history up to that survey.
And the timing is key there.
It is. The greatest, sharpest increase in that division happened specifically between 2011 and 2014.
Which is a window of time that just perfectly correlates with the explosive, exponential user growth of these platforms.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they were all maturing their algorithms right then.
Right. That's when the feed shifted from just chronological to algorithmically sorted.
Now, before we look at the mechanics of how those two things are linked, the platforms and the polarization, I want to be incredibly transparent with you, the listener.
Yes, we need to clarify this.
What is fascinating about the data sitting in front of us is that it is completely politically agnostic. The algorithm itself does not have an ideology.
Right. It doesn't lean left or right.
So as we discuss these sources and the claims they make about specific extremist groups, we are looking strictly at the mathematical mechanism of how information spreads.
We are absolutely not endorsing any political viewpoints here. We are just impartially reporting the claims from the source material.
Exactly. The algorithm doesn't care if a piece of content is far left or far right. We are examining the plumbing of the system, not the water flowing through it.
And that distinction is crucial because to understand this radicalization loop, you really have to understand the plumbing.
Okay, so what is the core of that plumbing?
It's something called unsupervised machine learning.
Unsupervised machine learning. I mean, that just sounds slightly terrifying on its face.
It does, yeah.
It sounds like leaving a toddler alone in a kitchen with a blowtorch. What does unsupervised actually mean in a coding context?
It's a major paradigm shift in how software operates. So in traditional supervised programming, a human engineer writes explicit rules.
Like if X happens, do Y.
Exactly. If the user clicks this button, load this specific page. A human dictates the logic. But in unsupervised machine learning, you don't give the machine the rules.
So what do you give it?
You give the machine a massive, incomprehensible pile of user data, and you give it a single, overarching goal.
And in the case of a social media company, I'm assuming that goal is essentially to maximize user engagement.
Exactly. Keep them on the screen to show them more ads.
Right.
So the engineers tell the algorithm to figure out whatever it takes to maximize that metric.
Without telling it how.
Right. The machine then runs millions of these micro-experiments. It throws variables at the wall, observes user behavior, and adjusts itself in real time without any human intervention.
That is wild.
And often, the engineers who built the system can't even tell you why an algorithm made a specific recommendation. They only know that it achieved the engagement goal.
So the machine is essentially running a massive planet-scale trial and error experiment on us.
Yes, on all of us constantly.
And what did this unsupervised intelligence discover? Like, what is the most effective way to keep human beings glued to a screen?
It discovered that human beings are neurologically hardwired to pay attention to threats.
So
Yeah, it targets high arousal emotions, specifically outrage and anger.
which makes total sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right? I mean, if we were walking through the savannah, a feeling of deep contentment doesn't keep us alive.
Right. Contentment gets you eaten.
Exactly. A sudden spike of fear or anger regarding a rustling bush is what keeps us alive. So the algorithm basically hacked our survival instinct.
It did. The algorithm doesn't have a built-in mechanism to consider the accuracy, the nuance, or the societal benefit of a piece of information.
It just doesn't care.
It only measures the behavioral response. So if a piece of content makes people furiously angry, they click it, they type long comments, they share it with an angry caption.
And the algorithm registers that flurry of activity as a massive success.
Exactly. It's blind to the context. It just sees the speedometer redlining and thinks, oh, great, give them more of that.
This is the exact mechanism that explains that famous finding in the research, right? The one about fake news on Twitter.
Yes, that fake news spreads 6 times faster on Twitter than legitimate news.
6 times faster. That is just staggering.
Well, legitimate news is often heavily caveated, it has nuance, and honestly, it can be a bit dry. But fake news is explicitly engineered to be emotionally explosive.
I'm trying to visualize how this shapes an individual's daily experience. I keep thinking about it like going to a dinner party.
Okay, the dinner party.
Imagine a party host who is incredibly observant, but has absolutely terrible social skills.
I know a few of those.
Right. So the host notices that during appetizers, you nodded enthusiastically when someone complained about the local city council. From that exact moment on, this host follows you around the room, exclusively introducing you to other guests who are absolutely furious, just foaming at the mouth about the city council.
And only those people.
Only those people. And furthermore, the host actively, physically blocks you from talking to anyone who thinks the city council is actually doing an okay job.
Wow.
So eventually, you look around the room, having only spoken to enraged people for 3 solid hours, and you naturally conclude, wow, the entire world hates the city council.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the construction of an echo chamber.
Right.
Because the algorithmic host isolates you. And when individuals participate exclusively in homogeneous discussion groups, completely devoid of friction or counterarguments, the psychological literature shows they tend to adopt much more extreme positions.
It's a radicalization loop.
Exactly. It's a well-documented process of group polarization.
And the sources document the real-world outcome of this. They explicitly mention how extremist groups, and they cite groups on the right like the Proud Boys and QAnon, saw massive proliferation during that 2014 to 2017 algorithmic peak.
Yes.
Because the unsupervised machine learning models were actively, aggressively recommending this extremist content just because it generated such dense, intense engagement metrics.
It was essentially an accidental radicalization engine. The algorithm didn't have a political agenda, it just had an engagement quota.
Right. And the sources even bring up Jaron Lanier here.
They do, yeah. Jaron Lanier, he's a pioneer in computer science, and he proposed a really fascinating behavioral theory about Donald Trump's use of Twitter during his presidency.
Right. Lanier essentially argued that Trump was as much a victim of the algorithm's behavioral conditioning as anyone else on the platform.
That's his argument. Lanier suggested that Trump's Twitter usage mirrored classical operant conditioning.
Like B.F. Skinner's pigeons.
Exactly like the pigeons.
Yeah.
When Trump posted something nuanced or standard policy-driven, the engagement was relatively flat.
But when he posted something hostile.
Right. When it was hostile, paranoid, or highly inflammatory, the algorithm rewarded him with massive, immediate global attention.
So Lanier's theory is that the platform's design actively shaped and amplified his most hostile behavior over time.
Exactly. Modifying the user to fit what the algorithm rewards.
It is wild to think about the most powerful political figures in the world being conditioned by a blind engagement metric.
It really puts the power of persuasive technology into perspective.
But let me test the logic of this echo chamber theory for a second. If the core problem is isolation, what happens if I actively try to break out?
Okay, so.
Like, what if I force myself to follow people on the total opposite end of the political spectrum? Doesn't that shatter the mirror?
You would certainly hope so. And honestly, that is a very common proposed solution.
Just follow the other side.
Right. However, the data paints a much more pessimistic picture of how that actually plays out.
Really?
Yeah. The sources detail this deeply insightful 2017 Japanese study that looked at Twitter network topologies. They specifically isolated users who made the conscious effort to follow opposing viewpoints.
Okay, so they found the people trying to be good digital citizens. What happened to them?
Well, the researchers mapped the interactions. They looked at who was retweeting whom, who was replying, and crucially, what language was being used. They found that even when users follow people on the other side of the political spectrum, the two sides rarely, if ever, discuss issues that actually overlap.
Wait, really? So if I'm a liberal following a conservative, I'm not actually engaging with their posts?
Not really. The study found that the two groups are concerned with completely different issues. And even when they are discussing the exact same event, they use completely different lexicons.
Different vocabulary.
Yes. They are essentially speaking different languages. So a left-leaning group might refer to an event as a protest, while the right-leaning group refers to the exact same event as a riot.
Oh, I see.
Because the fundamental terminology is different, the algorithm's natural language processors categorize them as completely separate conversations.
So they never actually intersect in the digital space?
Rarely. They rarely cross community lines. And furthermore, even if you do follow someone you disagree with, The platform's overarching community dynamics just reinforce your original bubble.
How does that work?
Well, you might see the opposing tweet on your timeline, but the replies beneath it will likely be populated by people from your own echo chamber mocking the original tweet.
Oh, wow. So you're just watching your team dunk on the other team.
Exactly. The bubble is incredibly resilient.
It's just two distinct tribes standing on opposite sides of a canyon, shouting into the void, and assuming the echo coming back is the voice of the entire world.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So we've established this massive structural problem. Unsupervised algorithms optimized for engagement have realized that outrage is the most efficient fuel, and that leads to deep political polarization.
Yes.
How do the multi-billion-dollar tech companies attempt to put the fire out once society starts complaining about all this?
Well, they attempt to build a new set of tools to moderate the chaos. But the tragic irony of the situation is that they try to fix algorithmic polarization by deploying yet another layer of algorithms to moderate the content.
Fighting algorithms with algorithms.
Exactly. And this introduces a new, highly controversial dynamic, which is invisible automated censorship.
Which brings us to this incredible, highly technical investigation by the journalism outlet, The Markup.
Yes, this piece of source material is fascinating.
They look specifically at Instagram's automated moderation during the recent Israel-Hamas war. And again, I want to be crystal clear with you, the listener.
Right, our second impartiality disclaimer.
Exactly. We are strictly analyzing the metadata architecture here. We are absolutely not evaluating the geopolitical conflict itself. We are purely evaluating how the platform's code responded to users trying to talk about it.
And the methodology that the markup used is what makes this source so vital.
Why is that?
Because they didn't just rely on user complaints, which, can be subjective.
Right, anyone can claim they were censored.
Exactly. Instead, they looked under the hood. They captured and analyzed the raw metadata that Meta's servers were transmitting to the Instagram application on users' phones.
Okay, let's pause. What exactly is metadata in this context? Let's define the scope of what they were actually looking at.
Sure. Metadata is essentially data about data.
Okay.
So when you look at an Instagram post, the data is the photo and the caption. The metadata is the invisible text file attached to it that tells the app how to display the post.
Like formatting.
Formatting, what time it was uploaded, what server it lives on, and crucially, what restrictions the algorithm has placed upon it.
Restrictions.
Yes. The markup was searching this invisible code for evidence of shadow banning.
Shadow banning. That's the practice where a platform hides or restricts your content, but doesn't actually tell you they've done it right.
Exactly.
You think you're broadcasting to the world, but your microphone has actually been unplugged.
A very apt metaphor.
So what did the investigation actually find in that metadata?
They found some incredibly granular, highly specific control parameters hard-coded right into the platform.
Granular like what?
I want to break down 3 specific variables they discovered because it really shows the immense silent power of this architecture.
Let's do it.
The first parameter they found was a line of code named isRegulated-C18.
isRegulated-C18. That sounds like a barcode on a shipping container. What does it actually do?
Well, the C18 refers to Canada's Bill C18, their news regulation law.
Oh, interesting.
If the algorithm flagged an account as belonging to a news organization and that parameter flipped from false to true, it would completely block that account's content from being viewed by any IP address located in Canada.
Wow, so just a single invisible line of code flipping to true fundamentally dictates what an entire sovereign nation is allowed to see on the platform.
Exactly. It operates at a scale that is just hard to comprehend.
That's terrifying. What was the second one?
The second parameter was named should have sharing friction.
Okay, sharing friction. In user experience design, friction is anything that slows the user down, right?
Exactly.
Like making them fill out a CAPTCHA or click an extra confirmation box.
Yes. So if should have sharing friction was triggered, the app would generate an "Are you sure you want to share this?" dialog box when a user tried to forward the content to a friend.
Now, on the surface, that sounds entirely harmless. I mean, it's just a polite pop-up. Why is that considered a form of moderation or suppression?
Because in the hyper-optimized world of the attention economy, even a microsecond of friction is devastating to virality.
Really? just one extra click.
Oh, UX designers know that if you add just one extra tap to a process, a massive percentage of users will just abandon the action entirely.
They just get lazy and scroll away.
Exactly. So by injecting that friction dialog box, the algorithm doesn't have to outright delete the post, which would definitely cause an outcry.
It just quietly suffocates its ability to spread.
It's a soft suppression tactic.
That is deeply manipulative. You aren't banned, you are just throttled. And nobody knows it's happening.
Right.
And what was the third parameter?
The third was media overlay info.
Okay, overlay info.
If this flag was triggered, the visual content of the post would be aggressively blurred out on the user's screen.
Like a content warning.
Yes, replaced by a warning message stating the content might be disturbing or sensitive. The user is then forced to manually click a button agreeing to see the underlying image.
Which again introduces massive friction, but it also changes the psychological context of the image before you even see it.
Exactly. You're already primed to think it's dangerous or bad.
So let me challenge the system for a second. If these machine learning algorithms are so incredibly sophisticated and they have all these nuanced, surgically precise little friction dials they can adjust in milliseconds,
Yeah.
why did the markup find that thousands of comments from everyday users were being automatically deleted and labeled as spam when they were clearly, obviously engaging in legitimate political speech?
That contradiction goes straight to the heart of the limitation of current machine learning models, specifically natural language processing, or NLP.
Okay, explain NLP.
Despite the intricate, granular metadata controls for the UI, the actual content moderation algorithms analyzing the text are largely blunt force instruments.
They aren't as smart as they look.
Not at all. They are terrible at understanding context, irony, or cultural nuance.
So they can build a complex cage, but the guard inside the cage is essentially blind.
That's a really good way to put it. You see, the algorithms were trained on historical data to identify spam.
Things like bots selling sunglasses.
Right. Repetitive text, unnatural link sharing, bot-like posting frequency. But during a massive geopolitical event, human users naturally start posting repetitive slogans.
Right, they share the same news links rapidly.
They use the exact same hashtags.
So the algorithm gets confused.
Completely. The blunt force algorithm cannot distinguish between a bot farm trying to sell crypto and a human being expressing a deeply held political grief.
It just sees a spike in a keyword and just swings the ban hammer.
Exactly. And the investigation documented some truly absurd casualties of this blunt force. The algorithm was deleting entirely benign captions without any warning. It was suppressing mundane hashtags. For example, the hashtag DM, which colloquially just stands for direct message, was completely banned from showing search results during this period.
Why? That's so common.
Because the algorithm mistakenly conflated it with an evolving political acronym.
Wow. And the most maddening part of the markup report is the complete lack of recourse.
Yes, the appeal process, or lack thereof.
Right. When legitimate users were caught in this massive dragnet and their nuanced political speech was arbitrarily labeled as spam and deleted, the automated system denied them the basic option to appeal.
They just hit a brick wall.
It highlights the extreme danger of automated censorship lacking human oversight. The public square is being governed by a mathematical model that fundamentally does not understand human language.
It's a very precarious situation.
I want to pivot here because the literature makes a fascinating, albeit dark, connection.
Okay, let's pivot.
If we follow the logic we've just laid out, an algorithm designed to maximize engagement discovers that exploiting high arousal negative emotion is the best way to keep us clicking.
Right, the outrage engine.
In the political sphere, that results in outrage and polarization. But what happens when that exact same algorithmic machinery is pointed away from society and pointed directly at our own identities?
Well, it discovers that personal insecurity is an engagement lever just as powerful, if not more so, than political outrage.
Which moves us from the macro world of society down to the microscopic world of the self. I want to dive into the psychology of comparison here.
This is a huge part of the research stack.
It is. We have this dense, fascinating academic dissertation in our stack that compares how different generations process social media.
Right, specifically looking at Gen Z versus millennials.
Yes, comparing the cohort born roughly between 1981 and 1996 the millennials, with those born between 1997 and 2012, Generation Z.
And the parameters of the study focused on the frequency of social media use and its correlation to social comparison and self-esteem.
Now, let me stop you right there because I read this section of the dissertation 3 times to make sure I wasn't completely misunderstanding the math.
It's a surprising finding.
Very. The data in this study shows a negative correlation between social media use and social comparison for Gen Z.
Correct.
Meaning, the more they used it, the less they engaged in painful social comparison. How is that mathematically or logically possible?
It seems backwards, right?
That finding completely flies in the face of the dominant cultural narrative we have been fed for a decade. Everything we hear says Gen Z is the most anxious, comparison-obsessed generation in history, specifically because of social media.
It is a deeply counterintuitive finding at first glance. And it's exactly why this specific dissertation is so valuable. It challenges that monolithic narrative.
So how do the researchers explain it?
The analysis provides a really compelling synthesis to explain that negative correlation. It comes down to the concept of being a digital native versus a digital immigrant.
Gen Z being the natives. They have never known a world without ubiquitous high-speed internet and algorithmic feeds.
Correct. The researchers suggest this negative correlation points to a deep level of habituation and a highly evolved digital media literacy within Gen Z.
So they just understand the grammar of the internet better.
Yes. They grew up immersed in the digital water. They instinctively understand the grammar of a TikTok or an Instagram reel. They know, fundamentally, that what they're watching is a highly curated, artificially lit, often mathematically filtered performance.
So because they recognize the artificiality so clearly, they don't compare themselves to it as much.
Exactly. They may engage in less direct, painful, upward social comparison than an older demographic who mistakes the performance for reality.
So they have sort of built-in cynical armor. They look at an influencer's life and their brain automatically processes it as entertainment or fiction rather than a realistic standard they need to achieve themselves.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about millennials? They are the digital immigrants in this scenario.
For millennials, the study found the exact opposite.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it found a strong, statistically significant positive correlation between social media use, social comparison, and severe self-criticism.
So for millennials, more time on the feed directly linked to feeling worse about themselves.
Yes. The more they scrolled, the worse they felt.
I see the outcome, but what is the actual mechanism driving that vulnerability specifically for millennials? Why them?
It is an issue of developmental timing. Millennials adopted this technology, Facebook, early Instagram, during their pivotal identity formation years.
Late adolescence and early adulthood.
Exactly. They remember a childhood rooted entirely in the physical world, but then they transitioned their entire young adult social lives onto the digital grid.
Right. I remember when getting a Facebook account actually required a college email address.
Yeah.
It was deeply tied to real-world identity and real-world status.
Exactly. Because of that timing, the literature argues millennials are uniquely vulnerable to what is known as milestone-driven comparison.
Milestone-driven.
Yes. Millennials are currently in the life phase where society expects them to be hitting major markers.
Right. Advancing in careers, getting married, buying houses, having kids.
Exactly. When they scroll through a feed, they aren't just looking at entertainment like Gen Z might be. They are looking at a dashboard of their peers hitting these massive life milestones presented in a highly curated, idealized format.
Wow, it's weaponized FOMO.
It really is.
And the sources break this down using a couple of foundational psychological frameworks to explain why it hurts so much. First, they reference Leon Festinger's social comparison theory.
Yes, a theory developed back in 1954, long before the internet, but one that maps perfectly onto it today.
What's the core of his theory?
Festinger posited a basic human drive. We determine our own social and personal worth based on how we stack up against others.
So we evaluate our own opinions and abilities by comparing them to our peers.
Yes, and he broke that down into upward and downward comparison.
Downward comparison is when we compare ourselves to someone we perceive as worse off,
right?
Which generally makes us feel better about our own situation.
Right. And upward comparison is when we look at people we perceive to be doing better than us.
Which can be motivating, right?
In moderation, yes, upward comparison can absolutely be motivating. But in the context of social media, users are bombarded with an unceasing, mathematically optimized stream of upward comparisons.
Because nobody posts their failures.
Yeah.
You are comparing your messy, chaotic, everyday reality against a globally distributed algorithmic feed of everyone else's absolute highest achievement.
Exactly. It's an unfair fight.
And that leads to the second framework the sources mention, which is Erving Goffman's self-presentation theory.
Goffman wrote this in 1959. He used the metaphor of theatrical performance to explain human social interaction.
Okay, a theater metaphor.
He argued that in everyday life, people curate an idealized stage persona for the public. He called this the front stage.
Right, this is where we act according to societal norms and present our best selves.
Meanwhile, we keep our messy, unpolished, anxious realities hidden in what he called the backstage.
So social media is essentially the most powerful front stage ever constructed in human history.
It is a front stage with global reach, equipped with lighting, editing software, and an audience of millions.
No pressure.
Right. The deep psychological exhaustion that users feel, particularly millennials, according to the study, stems from the immense cognitive load required to maintain that flawless front stage performance online.
It takes so much energy to pretend everything is perfect.
It does. And simultaneously, the psychological damage occurs when they sit in their own backstage reality feeling totally inadequate because they compare their backstage to the impossibly perfect front stage performances of their peers.
It's just a recipe for profound misery.
It really is.
Which segues perfectly and tragically into what happens when that curated front stage performance isn't just about what car you drive or what vacation you took, but becomes literally mapped onto your physical body.
Yes, when the algorithmic standard of perfection manifests physically.
Yes. I want to transition into the medical data in our stack now. Let's talk about the phenomenon of selfie dysmorphia.
This is a heavy section.
The sources introduce a term that was originally coined in 2018 by a British cosmetic doctor named Dr. Tidjane Esho. He called it Snapchat dysmorphia.
It is also heavily referenced in the broader clinical literature as selfie dysmorphia.
So body dysmorphic disorder is a recognized psychological condition where an individual obsesses over a perceived flaw in their physical appearance.
But selfie dysmorphia introduces a highly specific, technologically driven modern twist to that.
And the data surrounding this is just startling. According to a comprehensive 2022 survey conducted by the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, 79% of plastic surgeons reported that patients were coming into their offices seeking surgical intervention, specifically because they wanted to look better in their selfies.
Almost 80%.
Almost 80%. And the fundamental nature of the surgical consultation has shifted drastically in the last decade.
It has. Historically, if a patient wanted cosmetic surgery, they might bring in a magazine cutout of a famous celebrity.
Right. They would say, I want a nose that looks like this actress, or I want a jawline like this actor.
Exactly. They were aspiring to a biological reality that belonged to someone else. But today, patients are bringing in heavily filtered, augmented reality photographs of themselves.
I cannot even fathom the psychological dissonance of being a medical professional, sitting across from a human being, and having them hand you a phone displaying a digital avatar with like animated dog ears and having the patient say, "Doctor, make my physical face look exactly like this."
The dog ears are the extreme example, obviously, but the more insidious manifestation is the desire for what they call the Instagram face.
The Instagram face.
The mechanism of harm here is incredibly potent. These augmented reality filters on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, they aren't just overlaying funny graphics anymore.
Right, it's not just rainbows coming out of your mouth.
Yeah. No, they are utilizing advanced facial recognition and AI to subtly and sometimes aggressively alter human anatomy in real time. It creates an entirely unattainable standard of beauty.
Break down the anatomy of that Instagram face for us. What is the algorithm actually doing to the biological structure of the face?
It is creating a mathematical composite that simply does not exist in nature.
Okay.
The algorithm instantly smooths the skin to appear entirely poreless and textureless.
Like plastic.
Yes. It enlarges the eyes, tilting them upward to create a cat-like appearance. It unnaturally plumps the lips, narrows the bridge of the nose, and lifts the cheekbones.
So it's standardizing everyone's face.
Exactly. Yeah. It is homogenizing global facial features into a single algorithmic ideal.
And the impact of viewing this altered reality, especially on young girls, is devastating. The sources cite extensive research from the Dove Self-Esteem Project here.
Yes, the data is very revealing.
They found that a staggering 60% of young girls felt actively upset and distressed when they looked in a physical mirror because their actual appearance didn't match the retouched, filtered online version of themselves.
The psychological dissonance there is profound. The brain has evolved over millions of years to recognize faces and assess social hierarchy based on physical reality.
Right.
When you introduce a digitally perfected, computationally flawless face into that evolutionary hardware and tell the brain this is what you're supposed to look like, it causes a biological short circuit.
The brain can't process it.
Exactly. The brain immediately ranks the physical, unfiltered self at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy, which triggers massive spikes in cortisol and anxiety.
And this behavior is being hardwired incredibly early. The Dove study noted that by the age of 13, 80% of girls have already downloaded an app to manipulate and distort the way they look online.
80% by age 13.
Yes. They are internalizing this algorithmic beauty standard before their physical bodies have even finished going through puberty.
They are essentially competing with a digital ghost of themselves, a ghost they can never actually become.
Which raises a fundamental question, right? If using these filters makes us feel so physically inadequate and miserable, why is it so incredibly hard to stop using them? Why don't we just turn the filter off?
To answer that, we have to look at the neurophysiology of the brain. It comes down to a vicious dopamine loop.
Dopamine.
Dopamine is often misunderstood simply as the pleasure chemical, but it is more accurately the chemical of anticipation and reward learning.
Okay.
When a teenager posts a heavily filtered, mathematically perfected photo of themselves and receives a sudden influx of likes, comments, and direct messages, it triggers the brain's reward system.
Specifically, the literature mentions a region called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. This is the region of the brain involved in processing risk, fear, and decision-making, but it is deeply tied to social reward.
So it lights up when we get likes.
Yes. And crucially, this is the exact same neurological pathway that is activated by unexpected financial rewards, like winning money on a slot machine, or by the ingestion of highly addictive substances.
So the platform functions exactly like a slot machine in your pocket.
It utilizes a variable reward schedule. When you pull the lever on a slot machine, you don't know if you'll win nothing, a little, or the jackpot.
Right, the suspense.
That unpredictability is what makes it so addictive to the brain.
Yeah.
When you post a photo, you don't know if it will get 10 likes or 1,000 likes. The unpredictability drives the compulsion to check the app constantly.
Now, combine that unpredictable slot machine with an AI filter that guarantees the photo you input is flawless.
That is where it becomes dangerous. You are guaranteeing a baseline level of social validation through artificial manipulation.
Right.
The sources feature a quote from tech analyst Tim Estes that really captures the severity of this. He described artificial intelligence as digital fentanyl mixed with the digital heroin of social media.
Wow. It's a really intense metaphor.
Yeah,
But it highlights the compounding effect.
it does.
The social media platform provides the delivery system, the syringe, so to speak, and the AI filter provides the hyper-concentrated synthetic drug.
Exactly. The brain becomes biologically wired to crave the massive validation spike that only the fake, filtered image can provide,
And the physical, unfiltered self can never generate that level of neurological reward.
which only deepens the dysmorphia and the reliance on the filter. It is a cycle driven by fundamental neurobiology.
So we have mapped out this incredibly destructive loop. The algorithms drive outrage for engagement, and they exploit deeply held physical insecurities for engagement.
Yes.
Which leads to the most cynical question of all. Do the platforms know? Do the executives at these multi-billion-dollar social media giants sit in boardrooms, look at this data, and understand the psychological damage their product is inflicting?
That question leads us directly into the corporate conflict outlined in the most explosive documents in our source stack.
The leaks.
Yes,
Yeah.
the clash between leaked internal corporate research and outward-facing public relations.
Right, the infamous Wall Street Journal leak of internal meta documents. The data contained in those leaked files was absolutely damning.
It was a bombshell.
It showed that internally, away from the public eye, Meta's own researchers were conducting deep dives into user mental health. And their own data found that 1 in 3 teen girls reported that using Instagram actively worsened their body image.
1 in 3. And the internal researchers weren't guessing, they were measuring the harm.
And the mental health statistics regarding severe outcomes were even more alarming. The leaked documents revealed that among teenage users who reported having suicidal thoughts, 13% of British users and 6% of American users could trace the origin of those suicidal ideations directly back to their use of Instagram.
And then the whistleblower testimony came out shortly after, providing context to those numbers.
What did that reveal?
It showed that despite Meta's public relations team claiming they were actively building safety tools to protect users, the reality under the hood was vastly different.
Do you have an example?
Yes. For example, Instagram heavily publicized a new hidden words feature that was supposed to automatically filter out bullying and harassment in comments and messages.
Sounds good in theory.
But the whistleblower report demonstrated that the feature utterly failed at its stated goal. It routinely failed to block phrases as direct and horrific as "you should kill yourself." The algorithm let it slip right through.
Let me stop and ask why. I mean, if an algorithm is smart enough to shadow ban an entire country from seeing news, why can't it stop a simple, hateful sentence?
Because malicious users adapt faster than the algorithms.
Oh, like using code words.
Exactly. Teenagers engaged in cyberbullying use leet-speak, replacing letters with numbers. They use obscure emoji combinations to imply violence. They deliberately misspell words.
And the NLP doesn't catch it.
Right. The blunt source natural language processor we discussed earlier, it looks for explicit dictionary definitions of bad words. It misses the nuanced, evolving linguistic cruelty of a middle school comment section.
And beyond failing to stop the bullying, the leaked research established that the algorithms were actively, affirmatively recommending harmful content.
This is the most troubling part.
The system was pushing content related to eating disorders, extreme diets, and self-harm through the autocomplete search suggestions and the heavily curated Explore page.
The algorithm doing its job, unfortunately.
Right. The unsupervised machine learning system, ruthlessly optimizing for engagement, recognized that a vulnerable teen lingering on a diet post would probably click on a severe eating disorder post, so it funneled them right toward it.
It was an algorithmic pipeline to pathology.
Now, as analysts of this data, we have to look at the entire picture. We cannot just look at the leaks.
True, we need balance.
We have to play devil's advocate and examine Meta's official public response to these devastating allegations to ensure we have a balanced understanding of the ecosystem.
It is critical to examine their defense. Meta pushed back incredibly hard against the Wall Street Journal's narrative.
What was their main argument?
They published their own context, arguing that the journalists had cherry-picked highly specific negative data points from a much larger, more nuanced body of internal research.
Okay, so they felt the data was skewed. Meta pointed out that in their broader surveys, 8 out of 10 teenagers in the U.S. felt that using Instagram either made them feel better about themselves or had zero effect at all.
Right. They also highlighted data concerning teenage boys specifically.
Oh, interesting. What did that show?
Their research indicated that for teenage boys, 12 out of 12 tracked mental health issues, including complex struggles like loneliness, sadness, and anxiety, were actually reported as being actively improved by using the app rather than worsened.
So Meta's overarching argument is that the leaked documents focused on the extreme margins, and that for the vast majority of users, the platform acts as either a neutral utility or a net positive social force.
Exactly. That is their stance.
So, as someone trying to make sense of this for my own life, how do I synthesize this massive contradiction? I mean, is this platform the most toxic psychological environment ever constructed? Or is it a helpful community building tool?
Right, it's confusing.
Is it actually possible that both of those realities are entirely true at the exact same time?
I believe that is the most accurate, albeit the most complex synthesis of the data. Social media is not a monolith, it is an amplifier.
An amplifier.
Imagine a teenager living in an isolated rural area who feels deeply disconnected from their peers. For that user, finding a highly specific niche community on Instagram or a Discord server might literally serve as a vital lifeline.
It cures their profound loneliness.
Exactly. It is a massive net positive.
Okay.
But for a teenage girl who is already genetically or environmentally predisposed to perfectionism, or who is already quietly struggling with body image issues, the platform acts as a highly tuned, precision-guided, toxic amplifier.
Because the algorithm finds that weakness.
Yes. The algorithm detects that vulnerability through her dwell time on certain images, and it ruthlessly feeds those insecurities with a relentless stream of unattainable filtered bodies.
So the fundamental truth is that the platform's architecture scales both human connection and human destruction simultaneously at an unprecedented global speed.
That is the reality of the tool.
Which leaves all of us, the users, the parents, the citizens, in a highly precarious defensive position.
We have to learn to navigate it.
Which brings us to the final, most crucial part of our mission today. What does this all mean for you, the listener? If we are trapped in a system that relies on our psychological vulnerabilities and political outrage to generate profit, how do we begin to dismantle it? How do we build a path forward?
Well, the literature outlines several distinct paths forward, and they are broadly categorized into two camps.
Okay, what are they?
Structural solutions, which require systemic changes from the tech platforms and government regulators, and societal interventions, which are actions we can implement immediately in our own homes and local communities.
Let's examine the structural solutions first, since they target the root of the architecture. Number one on the structural list in the research is algorithmic transparency. What would that actually look like in practice?
Right now, the algorithm operates as a proprietary black box. You put data in, content comes out, and the company refuses to explain the math in the middle.
It's totally hidden.
Algorithmic transparency would mandate that users have the right to see exactly how and why their data is being weaponized to serve them specific content.
Imagine a literal dashboard on your app. You see a highly inflammatory political video, and you can click a button that says, "Why am I seeing this?"
Yes.
And it tells you, you are seeing this because you paused on a similar video for 3.4 seconds yesterday, and our model predicts this will raise your heart rate and keep you on the app.
Exactly. If users understood the mechanical why behind their feed, it would instantly break the psychological spell. Transparency strips the algorithm of its invisible authority and empowers critical consumption.
I love that. The second structural solution proposed is user agency. I absolutely love this one because it's so simple.
It really is.
The platforms need to be legally mandated to provide settings that allow users to simply turn off their predictive, trend-chasing machine learning algorithms.
The demand to return to the chronological feed.
Yes. Give us back the timeline from 2010. If I open the app and I only see posts from the specific humans I explicitly chose to follow, presented strictly in the chronological order they were posted, it completely neuters the algorithm's power to manipulate my emotions for engagement.
It turns the platform back into a tool rather than a casino.
Exactly. And thirdly, achieving these structural changes will likely require government collaboration.
Yes, the 2020 U.S. House hearing explored this.
Right. The sources reference that hearing, which proposed collaborative solutions between international governments and tech companies to crack down on algorithmic disinformation and manipulation.
The prevailing argument in the literature is that publicly traded tech companies are legally bound to maximize shareholder value.
So they won't fix it themselves.
Because their profit models are inextricably tied to maximum engagement, they simply cannot be trusted to self-regulate. Therefore, ethical design parameters must be guided or forcefully mandated by public policy.
But legislation takes years, if not decades, to catch up with technology. We cannot just sit back and wait for a congressional committee to fix the internet.
No, we need to act now.
There are grassroots societal interventions that the research says we can and must take right now. The sources highlight corporate and nonprofit initiatives, like the Dove No Digital Distortion campaign.
This is a prime example of a massive brand utilizing its resources to push back against the algorithmic tide.
What exactly did they do?
Dove partnered with psychological experts to create what they call a confidence kit aimed directly at young people. It provides actionable resources to help parents and educators initiate difficult conversations with teens about digital manipulation, the prevalence of AR filters, and the wholly unrealistic standards of beauty propagated online.
It fundamentally comes down to media literacy. And honestly, reading through the educational data, the consensus is that media literacy cannot wait until high school civics class.
It's way too late by then.
It needs to be taught as a foundational skill as early as elementary school.
I completely agree. An 8-year-old today needs to know how to spot an AI-altered image just as much as they need to know how to cross the street.
Seriously.
They need to understand the concept of a sponsored ad versus organic content, and they need to grasp the foundational truth that what they see on a glowing rectangle is a highly curated performance, an engineered reality, not an objective mirror of the world.
And finally, the research circles back to the most basic yet most difficult intervention: parental and personal boundaries.
Yes, the screen time battle.
The clinical data strongly advocates for clear, non-negotiable physical boundaries regarding screens.
Two boundaries in particular are emphasized in the research. First, no screens during meals.
That makes sense.
This forces the brain to disengage from the hyperstimulating digital world and practice slow, face-to-face, nuanced social interaction. Second, and crucially, absolutely no screens in the bedroom during sleep hours.
Because the physiological impact is just as bad as the psychological one, right? The blue light emitted by the screens suppresses melatonin production.
Yes, but more importantly, the cognitive arousal of doom scrolling completely shatters sleep architecture.
It keeps you wired.
It prevents the brain from entering deep REM sleep, and the lack of restorative sleep drastically exacerbates all the vulnerabilities, the anxiety, the depression, the dysmorphia that we have spent the last hour discussing.
Okay, we have covered a truly massive amount of intellectual ground today, from machine learning to neurobiology. But before we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to pivot specifically to our English language learners who have been following along.
Yes, the glossary section.
As we mentioned at the start, navigating this digital landscape requires a very specific vocabulary. So let's break down some of the key terms we've utilized throughout this journey. Not just their dictionary definitions, but how they actually function in English conversation today.
An excellent exercise. The first crucial term we analyzed is echo chamber.
So in a literal physical sense, an echo chamber is just a hollow room where sound bounces off the walls and hits you again. But in our modern digital context, an echo chamber refers to an environment almost always online, where a person only encounters information, opinions, or news that reflect and aggressively reinforce their own pre-existing beliefs.
The linguistic nuance here is that using the term echo chamber implies a dangerous lack of diverse viewpoints.
So it's mostly used as a criticism.
Yes. If someone says, "You're living in an echo chamber," they aren't just saying you agree with your friends. They are warning you that you are actively insulated from rebuttal or opposing evidence. It describes a phenomenon called the false consensus effect, where a user genuinely believes the entire world agrees with them simply because the algorithm has hidden anyone who disagrees.
It's a critique of intellectual isolation. Perfect.
Okay.
Next up is a term from our moderation discussion: shadow banning.
Shadow banning is the deliberate act of blocking or partially suppressing a user's content from an online community, but doing so without notifying the user. The shadow prefix is the key to understanding the word. It implies secrecy and invisibility.
Right. I think of it like if you get banned from a restaurant, the manager tells you to leave and locks the door. If you get shadow banned, the platform lets you walk into the restaurant, lets you sit at a table, and lets you shout your order.
Yeah.
But they've secretly soundproofed your booth so the waiter can't hear you.
That's exactly it.
To you, the app looks normal. But to the rest of the network, your voice has been muted. It is the vocabulary of invisible censorship.
Exactly. The third term is the medical classification we explored: selfie dysmorphia or Snapchat dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia itself is an older psychological term, referring to an obsession with a perceived physical flaw. But adding selfie or Snapchat to the front modernizes it. It describes a specific psychological condition where individuals obsess over their appearance specifically because they desire to look like the heavily edited, mathematically filtered digital versions of themselves.
It is a word that captures a very modern tragedy. It takes standard historical body image issues and filters them entirely through the lens of augmented reality and algorithmic beauty standards.
You are diagnosing a sickness caused by software.
Yes, perfectly stated.
Our fourth term is the architectural foundation of the internet: persuasive technology.
This phrase refers to digital technology that is explicitly engineered to alter a user's attitudes, behaviors, or habits through persuasion and social influence.
The key to using this phrase correctly is understanding that it implies intent. It means the technology is not a passive tool. A calculator is not persuasive technology.
No, it's not.
But an app that sends you push notifications, utilizes variable reward schedules, and gives you digital badges to keep you logging in, that is persuasive technology. It leverages human psychology to keep you clicking.
And our final term, which underpins the illusion of connection on these platforms, is parasocial interaction.
This is a fascinating psychological concept. A parasocial interaction describes a completely one-sided, asymmetrical relationship. is when a user expends massive amounts of emotional energy, interest, and time feeling connected to a media figure like a YouTube creator, a podcaster, or an Instagram influencer.
The linguistic weight of the word rests on that asymmetry. The user genuinely feels they know this influencer intimately. They care about their daily routine, their dog, their breakup.
But the influencer has no idea they exist.
Exactly. The media figure is completely, entirely unaware of that specific user's existence. It describes an evolutionary glitch where our brains see a face on a screen every day and falsely code that person as a member of our actual tribe, creating an illusion of intimacy that platforms exploit for engagement.
That is an incredibly helpful breakdown. Thank you.